Big Buck Registry's Big Buck Deer Hunting Podcast, episode number 100, a tribute to Lane Benoit, part 3, the original air of our interview with Lane from May 31st, 2014. Big Buck Registry is a virtual museum of hunting stories. We preserve a piece of Americana by interviewing and recording hunters about their hunts and experiences from across the country. And who knows, maybe we'll learn a thing or two along the way that'll help us take our hunt to the next level. This is Jay Scott, your host of the Big Buck Registry's Big Buck Deer Hunting Podcast. Lane Allen Benoit, 60, passed away unexpectedly at his home in Moortown on Monday morning, February 9th, 2015. Needless to say, it came to us as quite a shock. I was fortunate enough to interview Lane almost a year ago to the day and really pick his brain about how he hunted and how he lived. This is part 3 of the 3-part series, a tribute to Lane Benoit, podcast number 100 of the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. In the interview, we cover a variety of topics, and in the end, you'll listen to Lane say what he has planned for the next 12 months. No question, what happened was not part of the plan. So to Lane, my good friend, rest in peace. We will remember you forever, and please enjoy this interview remastered for the Big Buck Registry community. Lane, welcome to the Big Buck Registry's Big Buck Podcast.
Well, thanks for having me.
Well, it's an honor. It's not every day we get a legendary hunter on the show.
Yeah, well, I'm up here. This is the first time for me to do something like this podcast, and I remember when I was approached, I said, that sounds like bait for trout fishing or something.
Bait for trout fishing. We get that a lot. Dusty, we get that a lot?
We do, actually. It's crazy that you said that.
Milo Hansen said something similar. He goes, what the hell's a podcast?
Well, I live up here and kind of like a caveman up in the woods here on a Class 4 road with no power, and everything's off the grid. Got a generator and some solar panels, and pretty much left alone. Don't even have a landline. You don't fire his phone. So,
but you have a cell phone.
That sounds like heaven.
Yeah, I'm surprised it's working so well for us right now, where the weather is here.
Right now, tell us approximately where you're at right now, Lane, in the United States of America.
I am in central Vermont, and for most people, I guess, I know back in the old days when we were racing snowmobiles and traveling all over the country, I used to tell them we're from Vermont, and they say, is that in New York State?
Right.
And really, we're next to New York State, in between New York State and New Hampshire.
Exactly. And when I'm traveling, people say, where are you from? I just tell everybody I'm from Boston. Even where I live is nowhere close to Boston.
So where I'm up here is pretty woodsy, and it's not huge woods or anything anymore like it used to be when I was a kid. It was a lot more farmland and a little more rural than it is now. Vermont's growing up just like a lot of the other states as far as traffic and people moving into it. So it's a lot busier than it used to be. I mean, right now where I'm living up here up in the woods on a Class 4 road, there's no cars, no traffic, and it's quiet. All I'm hearing is the brook and the frogs out here right now.
I like that. That sounds pretty good. What do you say, Dusty?
Yeah, it sounds pretty awesome, really.
Sounds relaxing. You know, it makes a man just want to put on some pajamas and sit outside and listen to the peepers.
Yeah, that's the cool thing is, and, you know, nice thing about it in the summer here, the way the brook comes down through here and stuff, there's always a cool breeze, it's quiet. Sit out here, listen to the nightlife, and if you have to listen really, really hard to hear any traffic or anything going on. Usually see a loud motorcycle or a big truck way, way off or something, but I'm kind of in a little hollow, so even though it's up in the elevation here, and it's just a remote, nice spot. It's as quiet a place as I could find here in central Vermont, I guess.
Very cool.
Are you in like a cabin, a house? What do you stay in there?
Oh, I have a log cabin here, and I got a big old trout pond that wraps around the ledge here, and a brook that runs down through the property. As I'm sitting here on the porch, I'm looking off at the mountains up in the distance here, and it's pretty unique.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah, sounds spectacular. Lane, you grew up in Vermont. Is that correct?
Yes, I grew up in Vermont my whole life.
Okay.
And that's one of the things I'm writing my book on is what life was like back in, of course, as far as my memory first starts is the very end of the 50s. I was born in 54.
Okay.
So I'm writing from about 1959 on as when my first memories are, and what Vermont was truly like as a kid growing up, and being a Benoit, and growing up under the shadow and of the legend of my dad, Larry Benoit, and following in his foot tracks.
Larry was a legendary man, and he is a legend forever in the hunting industry. He really paved the way for a lot of hunting as we know it today, and he certainly taught you guys a few things or two about hunting.
Oh yeah, and that's typical of any family. And for fathers being a real father, they hand down their knowledge to their sons, and hopefully that they carry it on and follow in their footsteps.
Yep.
Every dad's wish, I think, a little bit.
What's your earliest memory of your dad?
I think it goes all the way back into when I was just a very, very little boy, and it was when they first ran pavement up through Route 100. When we first moved into that old schoolhouse, it was a dirt road, and I remember Dad coming home from work after they'd been paving out there, and we got into a bunch of tar, and he wasn't very happy with us. I was only probably about 5 years old at the time. But.
That's crazy. Now, how many brothers are there?
I've got 3 brothers and 5 sisters.
3 brothers and 5 sisters?
Yep, it was a busy little family in this time.
Wow, that's a big family.
Yeah, and you got to realize back then, growing up in rural Vermont, hunting wasn't something that you did for just sheer pleasure or for trophies or anything like that.
Right.
And we kind of progressed into the trophy status part of it by just for the fact that the bigger the deer we shot, the more meat you got.
Right.
And it wasn't about horns. I mean, we talk about the Hanson buck and the King buck and all that. Nowadays, everything's about scoring and horns pretty much. But in our day and time, it was about going out and shooting the biggest deer that you could find because you got more meat off of it. And as families went, it was a family tradition to go out, and if you had 5 tags, you went out and got 5 deer that were, legal deer for them tags. And even back in the days, it wasn't considered proper too awful much to share tags. The game wardens pretty much didn't pursue it much. They would kind of look the other way because they knew that, especially the large families, that you're feeding your family, And
right.
So I remember the game warden sitting right down and having a meal of venison right with us, and he'd look over, and one of them was a real loud guy, a very good friend of the family. I remember him looking at me, "Did you shoot that mountain boy?" And the guy would make me kind of quiver in my shoes, but just by the booming voice that he had. I go, "Yes, sir, I did."
Oh, that's great.
It was like, and he ended up being a really great friend of the family. His name was Jackson. I'll never forget him.
That's really great.
He scares somebody into telling the truth.
Right. So you grew up in Vermont with your brothers and your sisters, and venison was more or less, or shooting big deer became a way to put more food on the plate or store it throughout the winter and throughout the year. It sounds like it was more of a sustenance thing.
Yeah, and like I said, back in them days, the game wardens, if somebody needed food, there was a lot of big families around back then, and times were tough. I remember seeing food commodities and powdered milk and cheese being handed out that was Army surplus to some of the families that were needy, and I think my dad helped feed a lot of people around here off and on with some venison. I really do.
Right.
And I remember as a very little guy one time sitting at the table, and it was in the middle of summer, and we had some fresh meat on the table. I asked Dad, "What kind of meat was this?" And Dad just looked at me with that grin he always had there. It was kind of a sheepish-looking grin. And he said, "It's veal, my boy, veal."
Veal.
I don't know what it was truly, but I have my suspicions. But,
right.
And believe me, the game wardens back then, if you were feeding your family and stuff, they didn't bother the families much.
Yep. You developed a pretty unique technique, hunting where you do. Did you guys hunt in Vermont exclusively for a while and then started to expand?
In the early years, it was all Vermont, and we were shooting great big bucks here in Vermont. We were kind of the pioneers of what you call quality deer control management nowadays.
Okay.
We were managing in our own hunting countries way back then. We didn't shoot spike horns and the 4-pointers and stuff. when we were little kids, when we were young boys or something, we were allowed to shoot some smaller deer as we were learning to become hunters.
Okay.
And after you shot a 4-pointer, you would expect to step up to the plate and shoot a 6-pointer the next year or something, better. And that was kind of just what the philosophy was in the family. So eventually we all turned into kind of like trophy hunters in a lot of ways. We would just, with competition amongst yourselves and stuff. And when we had hunting countries, we didn't take the 4-pointers and the spike horns anymore and stuff. And we always had big bucks there every year. And up around Jay Peak, Belvedere, and the big woods up north is where we were doing that, which was where my dad was from, was over around Montgomery, Vermont.
Okay.
Which is up in the northern tier. And that's where all the big deer were at the time. And that's in the state. And if you go to Dad's house to this day, I can show you tons and tons of great big deer racks and stuff that were shot in Vermont.
Right.
What happened was then Fish and Game decided they were going to fix the deer herd. They were going to make it bigger, better, something. They were going to fix it. They fixed it all right. They fixed it so they weren't hurting any deer. They opened up the whole state to doe hunting, and the hills just ran with blood from does being slaughtered off here to the 60s and the early 70s to the point of where we didn't have any deer left.
Mm.
And then that also with logging and some other things going on, the big woods turned smaller. In the early 70s, my oldest brother and dad and them decided to move into Maine. That finding big bucks here in Vermont was just getting ridiculous. And so as soon as they went into Maine, it was like being kids in a candy shop. There were big buck tracks on almost every log road that you went and cruised around, and we were in heaven, of course. And by then, Shane and myself were becoming big buck hunters, and so we started shooting big bucks in Maine, and then we just started racking them up year after year after year. And we'd still come back to Vermont and shoot some good deer here off and on. I mean, I think the last buck I shot here in Vermont was in 2003 was an 8-pointer or something. So here, and then if I get time to hunt Vermont, and then I can still shoot a big buck here. It just takes a little work to locate them, that's all.
Gotcha. Let's talk about the progression of your skill set of learning how to track. When you guys were growing up in Vermont, did you start tracking then, or was it a different type of hunting?
No, we've always been a family of trackers.
Okay.
That was what as kids, when we grew up, as we were growing up, Dad and his family, his uncles and cousins and all that, sometimes they'd be, the night before deer season, they'd be downstairs there and I'm getting ready to go off and hunt. This is back when they were just hunting around bulls, so sometimes they were staying at that house. And us kids were supposed to be the dad, of course, but we'd have our ear to the trap door there and listen to all the buck stories and the big deer hunters and the bragging and the braying. You know how deer camp is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we were listening to all that, and tracking was all they mostly ever talked about in our family. That was how they were. And some of the older gents and the overweight ones or whatever would have to sit somewhere and do whatever. But there was no drives or anything like that. It was always about tracking or positioning yourself where the deer traveled.
Okay. Gotcha. So the skill set that you developed in Vermont carried on to the bigger woods up in Maine. And correct me if I'm wrong, as I heard you say, the reason that you guys went to Maine to hunt was because the deer population in Vermont at that time was not quite where you wanted it to be.
Yeah, well, as far as finding big bucks and stuff, and what was also happening was as hunters could get in the woods, the bigger woods more because of log roads opening up some of the large tracts of land. When you got tracking a big buck around in the end, it'll get shot on you a lot of times because people are within distance of when you're tracking. You need big remote woods to track when that happens. And that even still happens up in the state of Maine. Believe it or not, if you're up there tracking right now, you're liable on it. And it can happen anywhere.
Yep.
I had a guy one time, I was on a big mountain range. I swear he was the only guy in 10 miles around that mountain there, and I run one of the biggest bucks I ever tracked with. So that was one of the pitfalls of tracking is you got to have big woods, and you want it remote, and you want to be away from people if you can. And we key in on that. We try to find the most remote, hard to get to kind of places there is, and locate big bucks and track them.
Gotcha. So the key is really to get into these huge pieces of woods where it's unlikely to find other hunters.
Yeah, and if I track around home here where I live right now, if you run that deer around enough, he's going to get shot up.
Right.
If you don't get him, when you track him, and you don't get him in his bed, and you get him up and moving during the daytime there, because most of them will go nocturnal here. They'll find a place to lay down and haul up if they can, unless somebody steps on them. And tracking, if you can catch him in his bed and get him in his bed, then you got him. But if I get him up and running here, 9 times out of 10, somebody's going to be shooting at him, or they're going to get him.
Right, because it essentially becomes a push in a sense at that point.
Now, there's so many hunters around central Vermont here that it's pretty, unless you get up into the big mountains, and you've got a pretty good chance at doing it up in there and not having too many problems. The trouble is, as the day goes on tracking a buck, you keep jumping, and eventually he gets tired, he's going to go down in the lowlands.
Gotcha.
You're going to run him off the mountains, and once he goes down into where the hunters are, he's going to get shot.
Gotcha. Was it your father who decided to go to Maine?
He had gone to Maine on a couple trips with some friends and really liked what he saw. And I think my oldest brother, Lanny, was a bigger push on that than anything, because Lanny is a real wanderer and likes to see new country kind of guy.
Yeah.
And I'm the same way myself personally. I can't hunt a particular place too awful long before I think I got to go see something else.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't say my oldest brother was a bigger motivator than anything as far as doing it. We used to always call him our chief scout because he was just that wanderlust all the time.
Gotcha. How did you end up deciding that this was the area where you're going to start? Was there any criteria that you laid down?
You mean as far as the state of Maine?
Yeah. Like what you knew you're going to Maine, and you knew it was rural, but how did you decide that this is the spot where we're going to kind of rest our camp?
It's after a while you learn to see what's around you as far as the terrain, certain mountain basins, where got a good water source, maybe at the base where there's a big pond, where there's different vegetation from lower elevation to higher elevation. Great bedding areas. They got to have a good place to winter. There's a bunch of factors that you've got to play into and look at. We just cruise the log roads too and look for big buck traps. And once you find one, and a lot of times we'll stop the rig right there, and I'll track him whether it's snow or bare ground, and see. Even my guide in and see where he leads me, and a lot of times they'll lead you to where the popular deer are.
Gotcha.
Tell me real quick, is it a true fact that big tracks is 9 out of 10 times got a big nice rack on it?
That's you got to be careful with that. A big track does not always mean a big rack, and right. I've been saying that same saying for a long time. Some of the best racks that I have on my wall have been deer with not all that big a feet. They had great strides and a lot of stagger in the track, which tells me it's an awful big deer and everything. And sometimes those smaller tracks, you have to track them away and see what they give you for indicators on whether he's carrying a big set of horns or not.
Right. So you're saying that I want to get a little bit deeper into that, Jay. I hate to butt in on you, but
no, go for it, man.
I want to know a little bit more about this tracking, because it's not very often that you are able to talk with somebody that can track well. And, with your experience and your upbringing, that sounds like, Lane, you got it going on as far as the tracking. Tell us some details on knowing that it's a mature buck and with some decent size to it. You got into the stride and maybe some stagger. Tell us a little more information about that, if you would.
Now, the stagger is a distance. If you will draw a straight line from the track up front, straight back, and say you got a character square, and you run it on the outside of the track that's up front, run it back, and then it turns into an L like a character square, and you probably have 8 inches of difference between the tracks as far as side to side. Then the length of stride is the distance between each track. Right.
Is there any numbers on what, like, as far as inches, feet? Is there any details that you can give?
I've never measured it, and I'm not an overly long-legged person or whatever. But if you take a big buck and he's walking at his natural gait, and I have to stretch out my stride to match it, that's one big long-bodied big deer. My logo on my hat is big tracks and big weight with that stagger and stride is I put a 6 shell in the track sideways, and if I can put that 6 shell in the track and it don't touch on either side, you're looking at a 230 to 80 pound deer. Depends on how fat he is and what time of season it is and all that.
Right. Yeah. It gives us a great reference. 30-06 shell.
Yeah. That's what my logo looks like. It's how I have just always measured them.
Right. Yeah. Awesome.
Gotcha.
And as far as tracking them on rack-wise, there's a lot of little indicators. A big buck, when he walks up to get between 2 trees, he moves his foot a little off to the side a little bit to clear the tree for his set of horns. And a lot of times they will always pick the nicest places to go. Where if he's following a doe, she'll go between 2 trees that are really tight. He'll go around them. And if he does go through some tight stuff, you'll see where his horns are making a hole through the stuff a lot, that breaking twigs off here or there. Sometimes they'll break a branch off and carry it for a certain distance in its horns, and then the branch will drop off maybe 10 10 feet away, 15 feet away. That's how far you can carry that one branch and the horns.
Right.
And just there's a lot of stuff that it takes years to get to perfect and get really good at it.
Right. How many years do you think it took for you to get to be as
far as the horn thing, I believe it or not, in the last decade is where I really concentrated on seeing what's for big horns and stuff. When we were hunting in Maine, we were just shooting big deer. What if you saw a bone? They had a decent rack, you shot it. We weren't really thinking about horns all that much. In the last decade and a half, I've been playing with the horn thing, and I've learned to analyze rubs and tracking the bucks and figuring out what they got horns that way.
Right. How many years do you think, say somebody was just getting into tracking, how many years do you think that a person would put in to become an effective, accomplished tracker?
That's a funny thing to answer, is because everybody's abilities are different.
Right.
I mean, I have taken a fair amount of people out and tried to show them tracking and stuff. And some people just cannot see what they need to see.
Right. So it's kind of like a gift then that you acquired gift.
It can be learned, but it is. Some people are going to take a lot longer to learn than others. And there's a lot of different variables. You've got to know when to slow down and when to go fast. And that's what we wrote all our books and all our stuff on. Through the years, it was trying to give some insight to people on what our technique was about. And here in the Northeast, everybody's a tracker pretty much now compared to the way that it used to be. Don't get me wrong, there's still a lot of people up in trees and tree stands and hunting that style. But far as to be successful in the real big woods of Maine and New Hampshire and our northern woods of Vermont here, you need to be a tracker, to really make it happen every year.
Right. How much does snow play a factor in tracking?
That's the most important thing, is getting snow. And unfortunately, we don't get the snow that we used to get in deer season, so it's been a problem, as far as tracking and stuff. I can bear ground them a long ways on leaves and stuff if it's raining like today. On wet leaves, like beech and maple and all that is pretty easy in those woods. When you start getting into the softwoods and stuff, it's a little tough. And it's tedious and it's time consuming, and to catch up to a buck that's really roaming is not going to happen for you on the ground.
Right. Excellent.
Gotcha. Lane, tell us a little bit about the rivalry between brothers. I've never heard that there was a rivalry between any of you guys. I'm just assuming that there is. Having a brother of my own, it was constant fighting, no matter what. It could be over a piece of bubble gum. Do you guys get along?
We didn't have a lot of constant fighting or anything. There was kind of a silent rivalry more than anything. My oldest brother and I were really close for a lot of years, and I noticed, just between me and you there, that we did start having some friction when I started shooting bigger, nicer rack than him.
Talking some smack. I like it.
I don't care what anybody else shoots. Myself personally, I'm not that way. But some people it bothers. Some people want to be the top dog no matter what. Myself, I don't personally. I'm not out there for. That's not why I hunt. But I do get a kick out of watching them turn green when I'm dragging one of those big racks. I have to say that.
Gotcha.
So there's always brotherly rivalry. So
sure.
And myself personally, I try to keep it at a minimum as much as I could. But it is what it is.
Yep. When you guys are out.
I get the question, sorry to interrupt you, I get the question all the time as well, who's the best deer hunter? Because Deer and Deer Hunting magazine wrote that we were the top 3 deer hunters possibly in America.
Yeah. And
that was my 2 brothers and myself. But they didn't say who.
Gotcha.
It was good in a lot of ways. And I always just told them, well, the public will decide it eventually, I guess.
What year was that published? I remember reading the article.
I don't remember. It was
15 years ago?
Have to know that. I don't even think it was that long ago. It was probably back in 2008, maybe.
2008, gotcha. Now,
7, somewhere around then.
What did you think about that article when it came out?
I was just thinking that they needed something to write about.
That's excellent. See, it doesn't sound like you guys are, you know your craft, but it doesn't sound like you brag or boast about it. It's
we're just doing what we do. That's, I never, myself personally, never could quite understand all the hoopla other than we're doing something that was a little unique from the rest of the world. And I guess anytime you're different, then it draws attention. So
very true.
And Dad was that way. Dad didn't, even right up until he was ready to pass away here, he just always kept telling me that I really, to this day, don't understand all this hoopla, all this about this. And he never really did understand it. He never realized that he was probably one one of the greatest influences in whitetail deer hunting that have come along since guys like Fred Bear and all that. You know, I don't think he understood his place where he truly was.
Interesting.
And I think the rest of us are that way too. I don't myself, as I sit here on my porch, and I don't know. I'm always amazed at it.
Yeah. Yeah. I never just, meeting you guys before, I never felt like you were all caught up in it. It was just kind of like, yeah, we'll tell you some stories and tell you how to do it better, and we'll help you out. But, we're not really here to show off, kind of thing.
No, that's not in our genetic makeup, I don't think.
Right.
I'm more would rather be that mountain man that's recluse and be left alone in a lot of ways.
Would you say you guys are still some of the best deer hunters in America, or you just don't even care?
Oh, there's no doubt that, and there's other guys out there that they're just as successful. You just don't hear about them, I don't think. I mean, hunting in itself has changed in so many different ways, as far as the way the world sees hunting. I mean, out in the Midwest, they sit there in those heated huts, and why they wear camouflage, I don't know, because they're inside a hut, you can't see them.
Good point.
And they're watching a green pile, or they know this buck's coming along that they've been feeding for 5 years, and he's a beauty, no doubt.
Gotcha.
But pretty much ranch raised, I would call it. I mean, I would like to do a deer hunting challenge to the rest of the world if anybody wanted to disagree with that. I've got some places where there's one deer in about 10 miles, and see who can come out of there with a big buck.
I like the challenge. How about the Big Buck Registry Challenge?
There we go. And I've been approached by some of those real, what do you call them there, reality TV show the people that are once from L.A.
Sure.
And I threw that concept at them, but they didn't seem to bite.
Oh, yeah, the Hollywood types.
Yeah, I would love to get nothing against Lee and Tiffany or the rest of the world out there, but I'd love to say, all right, guys, come with me. Let's go to some of the furthest reaches of Ontario or Minnesota, or one of them places where there's very few deer, and you got to figure out how to get a big buck out of it.
Right. That would be a challenge and a half. That would be interesting. We'll have to discuss that off air here.
See, I don't know if it'd be fair to have me do it, because that's what I do.
No, it wouldn't be, because it's something you do all the time.
Yeah, I'm used to it. I mean, where I'm hunting in Minnesota, northern Minnesota, there was probably one deer in 10 miles in places. And the first year, Dad and I showed up there. We drove around for 4 days just to find a deer track.
No kidding.
The wolves that eat everything out, so it took us a while to find some deer. When I did find some, and they were dandies. But
when was the last?
I'm getting a beautiful 170 class kind of buck with a big mahogany rack, and
oh wow,
and that was just about the only big buck that I saw when I was out there for 2 weeks.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So even skilled hunters like yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's the kind of style of hunting that I do. It's not about having a lot of deer. I'm just looking for that one big one.
That one. Not about a bunch, but just that one. Now,
yeah. Once I find him, then I'm on him.
Right. Lane, when was the last time you shot a deer that weighed less than 200 pounds?
This last year.
Last year. Okay.
Lately I've been hunting more for rat than I have body size. And this year I may hunt the Northeast here, and if I'm hunting the Northeast, then you're going to see me shoot some kind of 200-pound deer. Where I was hunting, 200-pound deer were not all that many. So.
Gotcha.
Other than where I was in Minnesota, and that one was just barely under 200. That the cameraman and I got together there on.
Gotcha. Now, as far as you mentioned that the tracking or finding that big track is the key to your success, but that and I've seen this on videos, you used to have, and I don't know if you still have it today, Casper the White Suburban.
Yeah, that was Lanny's.
That was Lanny's.
Yeah.
And do you all kind of have these heavy duty vehicles that you can get out on the old logging roads and drive around till you can cut the right track?
Yeah, we all have rigs pretty much built for going in the woods. That's
okay.
The secret in itself right there. And getting back into places where the average guy don't want to take a $30,000 truck. I've got an old '89 Chevy Blazer that came from California. The body's rock solid. And mechanically, we work. I make sure everything's 100% for deer hunting. And by the time I get down this junk again, then I got to rebuild it for the next year. But
right. So you spend as much time building engines to get out into the woods.
Yeah, building four-wheel drives to make sure we got places. Like last year, I ended up hunting with a friend of mine, my cameraman guy, and we used his rig because that's what he wanted to do. And he had a nice FJ, with all kinds of barrel lock differential in it.
Yeah. And
that was a nice rig. We got into wherever we needed to go with that. And we may use that again this year. I don't know. That was kind of incognito, and now nobody knew who it was.
What's your vehicle of choice if you had to pick one? Is there
I like
perfect
one? Nice Chevys, my older Chevys. But.
Gotcha. The big Chevy, and you jack them up so you can cover some larger terrain.
Yeah, you got 35-inch tires at least on them.
Okay.
3.5, 4-inch lifts. try to have a winch on them.
So it sounds like they're fully rigged for hit the woods.
Yeah, you want them rigged that you can get into some places.
Okay,
it's awesome.
What this is something that always fascinated me. It seemed like you guys always were hanging deer at camp. Pictures of all your books. I'm looking at a Benoit book right now as we speak in my library, and the way you hang a buck, we've seen bucks hung from the back legs and from the racks. What's your preference?
Yeah, Dad was one of the major causes on that. Was when there's a couple of reasons for it too. Is we don't when we field dress a deer, we don't open up the whole back pelvic area and cut out his anus and split the pelvic bone and all that, because you're just exposing a pile of meat. And a lot of times if you're hunting in a remote area, we're not going to be cutting them up immediately, so you don't want to expose all that. Plus, also tracking, it's not like we're just shooting them 100 yards in the woods and dragging them out. Sometimes we've got long drags. You got to go through beaver bogs or whatever else you got. You don't want all your meat exposed. So when you do hang them up, you don't want all that blood being tracked down into the lower end where your steaks and all that stuff is. And old blood is what will contaminate and make your meat smell and not be tasty. If you hang them upside down, then when they drain down into the body cavity, they go right out to the throat channel, and the blood just drains out his mouth, and you ain't got to worry about it.
Gotcha. So you prefer to hang from the hind legs.
Yes, and Dad just always thought it was the most disrespectful thing to hang a deer by its neck.
Gotcha.
Did that to criminals. The deer is not criminal.
Yeah, I can think back to those old pictures in the 30s, where they all hung them by the antlers, and I didn't know if it was a good thing or bad thing, but I see your point.
Yeah, the way we dress our deer and stuff and clean them out and everything, it's better to have the blood going down towards the neck.
Gotcha. What's it like hunting with a camera guy? I like to get out there by myself, and I can't imagine hunting with somebody else. You got to wait for them, that kind of stuff. What's that like?
Well, one of the first rules is I tell them, says, don't make me wait for some.
Good.
So that's one of the first things we get cleared up right off. When it's time to get up in the morning and get going, I only want to mention it once if I got to tell them to get up, and I'd rather have them up and dressed and ready to go before me if they can. And then fires tracking and all that's going. So far, the guy that's with me right now, we're a good match. I don't have to wait for him or anything. He's been physically good enough to keep up.
Yep.
And I'm pushing 60 years old, so it's not like you got to be some superhuman to stay up with me anymore. So
how many camera guys have you went through?
Oh, I don't know. I headbutted one once, and that didn't go over good. We're still friends, though. We're still friends.
The camera guy.
Yeah, well, we got in an argument because he was calling back home, and I just didn't want him telling the whole world what we were doing.
That's hilarious.
Not that there was anything wrong with what we were doing. It's just you're not supposed to be blabbing it all and showing footage to people before I get ready to get it out there.
Right.
Headbutted the camera guy.
That's awesome.
Interesting.
I used to be a feisty cuss, I used to just trappers. So
yeah, that's hilarious.
That'll usually get their attention. You headbutt the camera guy. He will.
I'm much mellower with them now. I don't get mad at them anymore when they don't get the footage. It's just I expect it now more than if they get the footage, they go, "Really, you got it." That's
hilarious. Now, how much do you have to be in shape to do the type of hunting you're talking about?
Yeah, I start out in the fall. I try to do some bird hunting. Walking in the woods is the only thing that gets you ready for walking in the woods. So let's get that clear. You can stair climb and do anything you want, or walk up and down a road and thinking you're getting yourself in shape. But truly in shape, you should hike. You should be in the woods. And I try to make sure I get as much time as I can before deer season. Bird hunting with my dogs and being out in the woods as much as I can before I go do the real thing.
Gotcha. It always seems to me, because I like to hoof it too, that there's you're using different groups of muscles. I think you're using a lot more. And if you're just doing a stair climber, they ain't going to cut it because you're just using one set of muscles the same way every time. But you get out in the woods.
Yeah. Well, when you're walking around in the woods, there's always stuff under your feet. You got to high step. You got to pick your legs way up to get over stuff. And you're just doing different movements than one repetitive movement.
Right. Gotcha. As far as the track itself, you talked about just finding a big track. Is it easy to say you found some tracks, is it easy to get on another track that you think is decent but wouldn't be ideal? Or do you actually have to spot on. Make sure that 30-06 cartridge goes in there, no problem, and that's the one you got to follow.
No, to find one where the 06 shell goes in sideways is a rare thing. It's hard. Up in the state of Maine, you'll find that more because they're bigger boned and bigger deer, especially in the northern zones of Maine.
Yep.
It takes a huge deer to live up there to the winters.
Okay.
From region to region, that's not always the case. As far as when I was hunting down in southern New Hampshire, there was not a deer to be found down there that you could take a 06 shell and put it in sideways. And
Interesting.
if you found one that you could put 3/4 of the shell in, you were doing pretty good.
Hmm.
So you have to learn to read what the area has to offer as far as genetics and bone size. And it's like where I was hunting in Wisconsin this year, Christ. The buck I shot weighed 185 pounds, had a nice big rat, and he had feet would have looked like a doe feet here in Vermont.
No kidding. Okay.
Pristine, beautiful feet on him, compared to, they weren't great big buck track feet like what you'd see in Maine or northern Hampshire or something like that. It's the same with Ontario. There's big track ones there, but I know like Hal Blood, when he first went out there, he struggled with it, what it was a big buck track. It's the same, he went over to the Adirondacks this last fall, and he wrote a story there, and I can understand what he was pointing towards. He says, what is a big buck track in the Adirondack? He was over there for a week or whatever he was there for, and he was struggling trying to find a big buck track because he's so used to seeing what Maine are. And the genetics and the size of the deer in New York State, their feet just don't run as big as the ones in Maine. And so he was struggling with that a little bit, I think. And that after a while, you learn how to adjust and do that in different areas.
Gotcha. So that's a good point. So you need to know the area, the deer population that you're in. And then
and what I do a lot of times as the bucks are being dragged, brought to the weigh station and stuff, you see a big buck being weighed in there, go look, see what his feet look like, see what size feet he has.
Okay.
And that'll give you a clue a little bit right there. And granted, there's always going to be an exception to the rule. There's going to be a big track from somewhere. There's going to be a big-footed one, just like men and women versus there's big men and then there's small men, and genetically that's the case no matter where you are. But there's always going to be some size of a buck in certain areas, and there's not just whether that's what the genetics lean towards or not.
Gotcha. Okay. Very, very good point. Lane, I'd like to have Dusty kind of run down through like a gear check, the type of gear that you bring into the woods with you when you're heading out.
I usually have a GPS now, which I never used to hunt with, which is a hell of a tool because it's amazing. And as far as it'll tell you your approximate time that you can get out to back to your truck, how far away from it you are. And it takes away from a lot of the guesswork that I used to have to do. As far as just being a woodsman and knowing. I always have a compass sometimes too. I may have another one, put it in my back pocket because one thing about compasses, those never lie.
Right. And
GPS can conk out on you at any given moment being electronic, so you should know how to run a compass. And I always make sure I have something to start a fire. And other than that, my drag rope, plenty of bullet, and some food that are usually enough food. So if I have to spend the night, I got something I can chew on while I'm under a spruce tree watching my fire go.
Gotcha.
Going if I do spend the night in the woods. Unfortunately, I've never had to spend the night in the woods. I've been awful close, but never had to.
That's cool. What about scents? Do you ever use any like buck scents or anything like that? Doe and heat?
I got just one scent that I use. That's common sense.
Common sense. That's good. That's the best sense to use of all, right? Common sense. What about game calls? You ever use any game calls?
I use grunt calls a little bit.
Okay.
Once in a while.
Not a lot.
I buy my own throat and burping. I've used that as a grunt call when I didn't have a grunt call a few times and actually called the buck in. So I could hear him walking around and I got his attention with it and he came right to me and came checking me out.
Gotcha. All right. So common sense of a grunt call of some sort. Use any like doe calls or anything like that, like the can or anything like that?
Yeah, I've got a little bleed can that I've used off and on that worked really well in Ontario. I've never had it work anywhere else for me, but out there there's at the time there was a high percentage of does and bucks competing. The buck competing over the does and stuff, and the bucks seem to very curiously wise come check it out.
Interesting.
That's worked pretty well for me a couple times.
What's your preference for a firearm?
I love my Remington pumps. You can be at 30-06, 270, it doesn't matter.
Okay. As long as it's a pump of some sort, 30-06.
Yeah, as long as it's a Remington pump.
Okay.
It's about the most fail-safe, light, quick action, ready to go, gun.
Yep. Anything else that you bring in the woods besides that?
No, that's pretty much all I've ever needed. And make sure you got gloves, and that's about it. I mean, and don't overdress if you're going to be a tracker, because if you get sweated up, and then that's going to be one of the worst things that can happen to you, is all wringing wet with sweat. Then if you do have to spend the night, when you settle down, you'll get cold quicker than heck from that.
Right.
If I get tracking a buck really hard, I take my jacket off, take my shirt off, put it in the game pouch, and strip down real light, try not to get all sweated up.
Gotcha. That does kind of bring up a good question. So you're not jogging through the woods. You're methodically moving, and sometimes moving faster, sometimes moving slower.
Yeah, if that buck is really cruising and looking for does, you got to go as fast as him or faster to catch up.
Okay.
And what I do a lot of times is I slip up my gun on my shoulder and I'm headed, and my strides are matching his. And every time he takes a turn in the woods, if I can cut that track off from where I can last see it way out there versus where I'm standing, if he takes a loop to the right, and I'll cut it off every time. I'll keep cutting it off. And every time you do that, you're gaining ground on it. You come on to where he's making ground scrapes, done some rubs. That's nice to look at. There's times to analyze and look at things when I'm tracking. I can care less. I keep right on the cruising, because he wasted a bunch of time there. I'm not gonna.
Gotcha. And when do you
catch up to him?
When do you decide to slow down?
When he starts slowing down and starts feeding, or he's got into some other deer and he's playing around with some does, and it's time to start paying attention.
Okay. Very
and
interesting.
it depends on what they're doing. If he's chasing does and running, then you got to chase them and run right after him.
Right.
You want to try to get caught up to them, get in between them. If you can, you get between them, you got him. A lot of times, if I see some fresh buck urine on the ground there or whatever, I'll rub some on their legs. Or same with dope feed, I'll put some of that on my pant legs a little bit, just in my boots, and keep on going. I talked to biologists. They said the best scent that you could ever use, probably in the woods, is their turds, believe it or not.
Just
Really?
deer poop.
Yeah.
All right.
I never done it. I never ground them upon me, but like I said, if I see buck urine or doe urine, a lot of times I just stick my boot in it and rub it up and down my pant leg a little bit just to give me something. But
Sure.
I don't know if it works or it don't. Usually by the time they smell me, and I should be seeing them, and usually I got a bullet in them.
Excellent. What about like hemlocks or things like that? You ever grab a branch?
Yeah, that would be good. Cedar, hemlock, your natural surroundings.
Okay.
I don't know about all this stuff that they sell in the market. I mean, you add an alien smell to his territory where he comes into, especially if you're doing setups. I think it's going to put him on full alert. Like, holy cow, there's something different here.
Gotcha. Okay. Now,
if I am doing a setup, I don't mess with their natural, what they're doing there. There's ground scrapes there being frequented and being used by the does, and the bucks are coming checking them. You don't need to go over there and squirt nothing there or hang anything up. And if that thing's active, there's going to be deer showing up.
okay. Just leave it, is what you're saying.
Yeah, just leave it alone. That's the best luck I've ever had.
Gotcha.
What's your opinion on some of these scents and cover scents and doe urines that they got on the market?
Well, I think they got some stuff that's probably working pretty good. I mean, that standing doe or whatever by Cold Blue, I mean, that's natural. The problem is what's going on now with the natural products and stuff. Canada's banned it, like up in Ontario where we were hunting up there. I think you get a $350 fine if they catch you with it now because they're worried about the chronic waste disease problem. So myself, I never use any of this stuff hardly, so I don't really have a huge take on it. I don't think I'm the guy that should be answering that question because I don't use this stuff.
Right. Yeah, just it makes it nice to hear an opinion from somebody that's not using it.
Yeah, I don't really need to use it, like I said, because I just what's there that's natural and around me is good enough as far as I'm concerned. I don't think tampering with anything is the way to go. I mean, I've heard of guys that do scent drags and mock scrapes and it works for them. I mean, that's what they swear by, and the chances are that's probably just fine. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not somebody that uses it, so I wouldn't really be the one to question on it.
Right. Everybody's got that one buddy that swears that the monster came down scent trail, and I always tell everybody that my opinion is that it's a deer deterrent on that scent rag that you're dumping out of that bottle. It's seems like more often than not.
Yeah, that's the way it seemed for me. I've seen hot scrapes go right to cold because I played around with them. But that's what little I have played with them, so that's why I don't do it.
Right, and that's a great tip right there. Is that come from experience.
And I hate to say that because there's guys that are making a living off of this stuff, and they swear by it, and they're doing good, and they're killing deer every year. So who's to say who's right and who's wrong? That's all on that. So.
Right. I agree to that.
And it could be just because we don't know what we're doing.
Right.
I mean, I know they wear special gloves and they don't touch any human scent. I mean, they're real fanatics about how they go out. So.
Right. It seems like that's a lot of work to go deer hunting now.
Yeah, I just like putting a bullet in my gun and I stick my finger out, wet it, see which way the wind's blowing, and do my setup.
That's awesome.
Right on.
That way. Lane, have you ever had any encounters with like wolves or any situations like that?
I mean, you can't help but have encounters especially if you're up in Canada or Minnesota where we're hunting there. I haven't had any real rude ones with them, but I have had where they do give you an awful eerie feeling when you see one standing there looking at you for a minute.
Yeah, it seems like that might be a little hair-raising experience there.
I mean, as long as I got my .6 or 270 in my hands and a full clip, they don't want to play with me anyways, I don't think.
Right, gotcha. All right, so I was hunting in the woods a couple of years ago in near my hometown, and I bumped into a hunter there who said he was good friends with your family, and I've forgotten his name since now. But he was out there trying to get a deer for his son, and he had already shot his 10-pointer because he found a place where they were crossing in this marshy area. And he figured that was the one spot. He actually found the area when he was bass fishing and watched lots of deer cross, and he went back and said he shot a nice 10-pointer there. But he had explained to me when we were talking there in the woods that he had known you guys, and it was a very dry year, and the leaves were loud as heck. And he explained to me that you guys didn't care about sound. Like, you just marched through the woods, and it didn't matter. Is that true?
Yeah. We call that crunching up on them. What you do is basically, have you ever heard a deer walking through the woods on leaves?
Yeah.
They just go, they trudge along,
right.
And they stop, listen a little bit, and it's pretty much what we do.
Okay.
I mean, that's the pace I do. That's what's worked best for me.
Okay.
And if you don't want to go too fast, and you just don't want to go too slow. And if you got two people walking, I think they tend to hear that as like a deer walking with 4 legs versus man, has a sound of walking with just 2 legs more of it.
Gotcha. Once you finally get on a track, is it a solo game from there? Other than the camera guy, of course.
Pretty much. I mean, I've double teamed with my best friend Coker. Lanny and I've shot a pile of bucks together. I mean, we've done it where there's 3 guys. So, I mean, it's much easier as a solo hunter, by yourself than anything, and just one-on-one you and that deer, and there's nobody to yell at for breaking branches or something to be quiet, make that a final approach and do things right, and there's nothing like it else in the world. That's one reason why we like this style more than anything, I think.
Right.
If you learn to accomplish it and excel at it, there's probably no more rewarding way to hunt than tracking a nice big buck down and getting them.
How long does it take from the time you find a track to?
Well, on the average, I've kept track of it. The magic time for me, and I've got some on film, and you'll hear me talk about it. Well, it's been about 3.5 hours, and a lot of times it's about what time it takes me to catch up to them, about 3.5 hours. But I'm getting older, so now it might be 4.5.
4.5 hours now. 3.5 hours when you were a younger man. Got it.
Right. But I'm just kidding. Each and every time you track a deer, it's individual and it's different.
Gotcha. Now that you're getting, go ahead.
I've had some where it took a season to get them, and the next one I tracked in 5 minutes, and I don't track it enough to the rig.
Okay, so there's a large variation, but on average, you're thinking 3 to 4 hours.
On average, though, I would say it was a good 3.5 hours.
Okay, gotcha. All right, so now you're going to be an older man, and it sounds like you're looking to pursue a few other things. Instead of just the hunt, I mean, you're still hunting, but there's some other things you're branching out into. Talk to me about some of this writing you're doing.
Oh, I mean, the funny part about this writing thing is my English teacher must be right now just can't imagine because I was the worst kid in English class you ever saw. I mean, he would have flunked me, I think, but he just wanted to get rid of me. That's the bottom line. And I don't know, I get all these stories that, that I tell people at the outdoor shows and stuff, and they're always telling me, geez, Lane, you should write a book. I mean, if you can put this stuff down in writing, it's reading material. People would love it. And so I'm taking my first poke at truly reading a column and writing a book now. So I've got about 4 or 5 chapters of the book already pretty well done up. And I did my first column for Fred Howard's the Outdoor Outdoor Gazette.
Yeah.
And that one was about a turkey hunt that I did where I ran into a mother bear and 2 cubs, which was quite an entertaining deal before I got done.
Yeah.
And so far, the responses I'm getting back, people really like my story because they felt like they were sitting there at the table and I was telling the story. So I think I'm on the right track on how I want to write and do things. So
you're finding your writing voice. That's the way.
I don't know how good I'm going to do at this because I never, my whole life, ever thought I would be writing anything,
Right.
Especially when I was a young fella, when all I had to do, they couldn't get me hard to write anything for English class,
Gotcha. I gotcha. So you're writing for the Outdoor Gazette, Fred Allen.
Yeah.
Who else you writing for?
My Northwood Sporting Journal wants me to do a how to do column, but haven't decided yet whether I'm going to do it or not.
Okay.
And I've had a lot of opportunities for different magazines through the years. It's just whether I wanted to pursue it or not. So I'm gonna try Fred's here first and see how well it goes, and then I'll worry about getting on board with some other ones probably.
Gotcha. How about some new DVDs? I've watched a lot of the first ones that you did. And I've collected them all, and all of them have disappeared and never came back. So they're good. I don't know. I wish I had those copies back, but I know that I'll never get them back because they're that good. People just hold on to them.
Well, I think they're selling the whole bunch of them. You can buy the whole lot of them off in Shane now if you want, and for a reasonable price if you get them back that way.
Yeah, that would work.
He was handling all the DVD stuff and stuff with Benoit Brothers.
Yep.
And I'm kind of away from that now. So now I'm branching out doing my own DVDs. I haven't produced anything yet because I was pretty much tied up with Dad for the last 4 or 5 years.
Sure.
And I wanted these last 4 or 5 years to just enjoying our hunt. And I filmed when he'd let me film them and filmed what I could.
Right.
And now I'm back at it. This last season was the first season I really actually went out with a cameraman and with the intent that we were going to make some, get some footage for DVD. And I got some classic Lane Benoit footage this year where I dumped a big 10-pointer 15 yards away right in front of us. And it was just nice, awesome footage. And we got a nice 8-pointer on film. So that we got all that produced and put in music on it. And I've got a ton of stuff that I've filmed the last, 10 years, 15 years.
Very cool.
And so I got to sit down and edit and go through years and years of tapes and chips and footage that's on cameras. And so I'm hoping to have one produced by the end of June.
Very cool. So you got some old footage, non-HD stuff. You're going to try to marry it in with some of the new technology, it sounds.
Yeah. Some of it's is not high definition, so it'd never be used TV unless they could figure out a way to make it HD. But
sure.
But it's the stuff that I got right now. The one that I was showing at the outdoor shows this year, the footage from just last year's hunt. Everybody wanted to buy that. I mean, I could produce that and just sell that. But sure. I want to give them a little more. So as soon as we get done turkey hunting and stuff here, we're gonna go back to the edit table and we're gonna try to finish up and have a really nice DVD.
Gotcha.
But a lot more cow doing it probably too.
Yeah, you've been doing deer hunting for years. Are you going to branch out into the turkey hunting and stuff like that?
Oh, I've been turkey hunting since my kid was 8 years old. He's 22 now. And I've been slamming big birds for year after year here. Last year I shot 2 big toms with 1 shot in Vermont here.
That's cool. You going to film all that stuff too, or are you just going to keep that to yourself?
That's filmed. No, that's filmed too.
Film. Awesome. So you're going to try to...
Yeah, this weekend coming up, I got to go do a youth hunt down in New Hampshire. I'm going to be filming a young kid there. Hopefully, we can get him shooting a nice big bird on film.
Nice.
You never know with kids, though.
You never know.
No, you never know.
No.
Sometimes they just don't even shoot.
True.
Go, how come you didn't shoot that bird?
I don't know. Yeah, I've taken some adults out and they forgot to shoot.
They get wrapped up in the moment. And
yep.
They don't fight the one to take a shot sometimes.
So what else is going to happen in Lane's world in the next 12 months? What else you got going on?
I'm trying to think. I've got a new clothing line that I'm just had negotiations actually today.
Really?
And I'm not going to speak any more about that till it's confirmed because I learned a lesson on that.
Okay. Gotcha.
Every time you think you've got something wrapped up and finalized and
right.
you don't really have it signed on the dotted line, then it may not happen. So,
right.
But it's going to be exciting. It's really beautiful products. So.
Some outdoor gear, hunting gear kind of stuff?
Yeah, it's going to be hunting gear, all hunting gear. So.
Okay.
Tell us a story, your earliest childhood hunt that you can remember. Can you throw that out there real quick, what it was and how it went down?
One of my favorite ones was back when talking about when, how long it took you to learn and do all that with tracking. I'd gone with my brother Lanny and stuff and shot some deer with him, and I'd shot one small buck with Dad the year before. And finally, we were up in Maine, and it didn't snow. And I decided, it snowed in Vermont. We're going to go back to Vermont. And my brother Shane said, well, I'll go back with you. And I remember my oldest brother Lanny saying, well, why the hell go back there? I should have to find a big buck here anymore. Should just stay here and finish the season out with us. I said, no, there's snow back in Vermont. I'm going back. And this is when I finally figured out how to truly put it all together and became a big buck. And so we jumped in a 58 Ford, my brother Shane and I, and headed away up to Island Pond from Duxbury here, which is a good hour and a half from here probably. It was all like Route 2 and bad roads. And the roads were just covered with ice, snow, and we almost got wrecked about 4 times, but we got there. And it weren't until 9 o'clock in the morning when we finally got there, and we left before daybreak. And we bowed up into this, what was called South American Pond back in the days road, and it's still there, but now you can drive a Cadillac up in there. But when we went up in, it was like an old log road.
Yeah.
When I got done, I had the exhaust ripped off the car, and a stump, and drove up through the floorboard and ripped the floorboard out from under my feet. So I was looking down at the ground and going, oh my God, I got to get this thing home. Well, we got up into where we wanted to go, packed the rig, and I got up into the woods there. Sure enough, there was this big buck track with a belt, and I ended up tracking the big buck and shot him and got him back home. We got back home with that rumbling wreck. That was the last time I ever ran the car. I mean, I ruined it.
That's outstanding.
So we couldn't go in that rig the next day. We took my brother Shane's car the next day up in there, which was an old 60-something Chevy, a little better shape than my 58 Ford.
Did you have to steal it? Did you have to steal it, or did he give it to you?
So Shane and I went up in the next day, then we went and got another buck, another nice. That one was a 7-pointer. And when Lanny and Shane came back from Maine, holy shit, there was 2 big bucks hanging up on the porch, and it was the only ones that were shot that year.
Oh, wow, nice.
That's awesome.
Very
That's
cool.
a great story.
So after that, I learned, I don't always have to listen to Big Brother. He doesn't know everything.
Very nice.
So
what did you say?
That's one of my favorite stories.
That's your favorite story. Is there any other favorite deer hunting story that sticks out?
Oh, I got piles of them, but I'm going to save them for the book.
Got to save them for the book. All right. That's cool. I'll wait for that book. Lane, how can people reach you? Do you have a Facebook page or anything? I know you're sitting in the middle of the woods in Vermont, but how do we reach you if we want to talk to you?
I'm on Facebook and putting there every day, sometime during the day or whatever. I check on it, and you can just punch in Lane Benoit and it'll show up.
Yep.
Or if you just punch in www.lanebenoit.com, and that'll go to my website usually.
Okay, gotcha. So you got lanebenoit.com, is that right? I want to make sure I've got this down.
Yeah, just punch in www.lanebenoit.com, and that'll bring you to my website.
Okay, and then Facebook.
I'm going to be revamping that up, souping it up here pretty soon.
All right, and I think we're going to do a little project with your Facebook page, if I'm not mistaken, at some point here.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Jay, don't get him upset. He's liable to throw the headbutt. Yes, just be careful. Just stay away from his head, and everything will be fine. Right. Put a helmet on.
I'm the new reformed Lane.
Oh, I see.
I'm not the old cantankerous mountain man that I was.
The cantankerous mountain man that you once were.
I should be, but I really work hard at not being.
Well, that's good. Sometimes we all have to work hard at little things.
I think there was a bottle of Captain Morgan that was involved with that one, though.
That'll do it.
Sometimes that does blur the judgment a bit, yes.
Yeah, I don't have to even drink anymore. I don't care about the stuff anymore. I've had enough.
Gotcha. Yeah, I hear you. Lane, thanks for joining us on this show, and I'm sure everybody listening will absolutely enjoy hearing some of the stuff that you've done and that you're looking to do in the near future here. But it's been a pleasure.
Okay, good. Thank you very much.
And that concludes the 3-part series, a tribute to Lane Benoit. Thank you to all who have contributed to the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast, episode number 100, a tribute to Lane Benoit. I can't help but think, but listening to Lane's voice one more time via the podcast is melancholy, yet we get to hear his voice once again. And I guess that's the beauty of a podcast. The spirit, the memories, the actual voice of great deer hunters never actually die. They just go deeper into the woods. It's been an incredible journey over the last couple of years, and we've met some amazing people. We've met some talented hunters. We've met some talented celebrity hunters, and we've met some talented podcasters that I looked up to as I was starting this podcast. Thank you to Mike Adams, Carrie Zilka, my co-host Dusty Phillips, Andy Galliano, and the entire crew over at the Outdoor Podcast Network. That's 100. We've got, I don't know, another 900 to go. But we'll be here. We'll keep doing this. We can't thank you enough for listening to the Big Buck Podcast. And as always, we'll see you next week. Can't wait.